Hello everyone, I'm Jamie, and today I'd like to share an intriguing story about my mother-in-law, Sarah. Currently, Sarah has very little influence in our lives because we made the difficult decision to cut ties with her. Getting to this point of no contact was far from easy. Sarah epitomizes narcissism. While I'm no psychologist, she exhibits all the classic signs of a narcissistic personality. To put it bluntly, Sarah is self-centered and thoroughly unpleasant, always prioritizing her own needs above all else. In stark contrast, my husband Paul embodies everything she is not. I believe this difference largely stems from his upbringing, as he was primarily raised by his father after his parents' divorce when he was young. Tragically, he only reconnected with Sarah after his father passed away from a terminal illness. From the stories Paul has shared, it's clear that Sarah is excessively controlling and manipulative. He once confided in me, "Jamie, my mom demands so much from me. She feels entitled to everything I have and expects me to take care of her forever." He recounted how she used to take his entire paycheck when he started working during school. For years, Paul thought this level of control was normal, but I knew it wasn't healthy. "You were essentially enslaved," I told him. "You worked while she lounged around in her apartment. You need to make some serious financial changes." "I know," he replied, his frustration evident. "I've tried talking to her, but she always guilt-trips me about abandoning her or leaving her to fend for herself. I even suggested she find a job, but she refuses to listen." Paul struggled with his student loans while financially supporting Sarah, who had stopped working when he was just 17. The same year he landed his first job. From that point on, he became the family's primary breadwinner, isolated from their extended family and completely under Sarah's strict control. He had no friends because she didn't allow it, and he could barely afford a phone. When Paul went to college, he was introduced to a whole new world, despite Sarah's attempts to keep him from attending. It was there, away from her overwhelming influence and among diverse people, that he finally recognized how abnormal his upbringing had been. 3 years into our relationship, I felt compelled to confront him about it. "Paul, your mother has been emotionally abusive towards you. She's manipulated you for years and squandered the inheritance your father left you. Why do you continue to support her?" "What can I do, Jamie?" he replied, his voice heavy with resignation. "She's still my mom. After years of hearing that she deserves my money, it's hard to break free. I can't cut her off entirely. She's the only family I have left apart from you." "I understand that," I said gently, "but you need to reconsider your situation. You're drowning in debt. How much longer can you keep this up?" Paul didn't have an answer. He realized that continuing to support Sarah meant he'd never escape his financial burdens, which made me question our future together. I was acutely aware that Sarah could become a significant obstacle, potentially trying to stake a claim on everything we owned. She already resented our relationship, saying things like, "Don't think you can take my son and his money. I'm his mother and the only one who deserves his things. You're just a gold digger trying to steal him away." "You need to stop relying on Paul," I retorted. "He's an adult, and so are you. You're perfectly capable of taking care of yourself." "Shut up, girl. Don't tell me how to live my life. I won't lose my lifestyle to someone like you. Paul will always be under my control, and I'll make sure of it," she snapped back, her words piercing but failing to intimidate me. Unlike Paul, I had a strong backbone and a knack for subtle revenge, which empowered me to handle Sarah without letting her harm us too deeply, even if I often endured her insults. As time went on, I found Sarah increasingly bearable. Both Paul and I completed college. I began working at a studio while Paul secured a fantastic position as a graphic designer. Despite his challenging upbringing, he was a dedicated student who achieved significant success. However, Sarah continued to exploit his finances without remorse. When Paul and I got engaged, Sarah was furious. She accused him of marrying a gold digger and expressed her worries about her own welfare. "How can you even think of getting married now? You still need to take care of me. This would be a terrible financial decision." "Mom, I'm already taking care of you, and getting married won't change that." Paul reassured her, but Sarah remained unconvinced. "But your wife will take all your money. You'll have nothing left for me. She doesn't earn much, and her mother is no help either. They'll just become a burden to you." "Excuse me, but my mom and I can manage perfectly well on our own." "We don't need to rely on your son," I interjected calmly, though her accusations stung. I held back the urge to tell her that she was the real financial burden. I knew that would only spark a pointless argument. I preferred to maintain the peace. Sarah saw my silence as an opportunity to further insult me and my family. My family, valuing respect and dignity, chose not to retaliate against her barbs, opting not to stoop to the level of arguing with a narcissist. Despite Sarah's attempts to sabotage our wedding plans, Paul managed the situation well. Although it frustrated him, he couldn't bring himself to completely sever ties with her. After our wedding, we settled into our new home. The specifics of how we acquired the house aren't relevant right now, but when Sarah found out, she was livid. She called me, seething. "So, you've already started messing with my son's money? Buying expensive houses without even discussing it with me?" "I have no idea what you're talking about, Sarah. Besides, how Paul and I manage our finances is none of your business," I replied, standing firm. I cut the conversation short, replying firmly. Sarah's resentment was palpable. "You think you can live in a big house while I'm stuck in this small rented apartment? Mark my words, Jamie, you won't enjoy my son's house alone." At the time, I brushed off her threats. She had a knack for making dramatic statements, and I had learned to ignore her, refusing to give her the reaction she craved. That was until one day when something alarming happened. While I was at work, my mom called, sounding puzzled and concerned. "Jamie, why is your stuff at my house? Did something happen with Paul?" "What are you talking about, Mom? Nothing is wrong between us." "How do you know it's my stuff?" "The moving guys told me your name," she explained. This unexpected turn of events hinted at Sarah's deeper meddling, a dark reminder that my strategy of ignoring her might no longer suffice. "Jamie, your boxes arrived here with your name and address on them. I've opened a few, and they're filled with your clothes. What's going on? Did the movers say who sent them?" My heart sank with a dreadful suspicion. "They mentioned someone named Sarah," she replied, her voice laced with concern. "I think you should come home right away and sort this out." Taking her advice, I left work in a hurry and rushed home. As I stepped into my bedroom, a shocking sight greeted me. My drawers and closet were empty, even my bath products were gone. I was stunned. Descending to the living room, I found Sarah sitting there with a smug expression on her face. "What the hell is going on, Sarah? Why did you touch my stuff and send it to my mom's house?" I demanded, struggling to keep my composure. Her response was chilling. "I'm here to set things right. From now on, only the homeowner and his mother will live in this house. A mother always has more rights than a wife. It's unfair for you to live here." "What are you talking about? You're out of your mind." I shot back, my anger rising. "Since the house belongs to my son, only he and I will stay here. You need to leave and go to a house that's in your name." "So, you're saying only the person who owns the house should stay here?" I clarified, trying to comprehend her twisted logic. "That's exactly right," she replied, a triumphant glint in her eye. "What I mean is, since I've already sent your stuff away, you can just leave. Don't worry, my son and I will be very happy here," she declared before turning and heading upstairs. I was furious at her audacity, unable to believe she was trying to throw me out of my own house. This house was in my name, and I was the rightful occupant. I couldn't let her force me out without taking action, so I made a strategic call. I immediately phoned Paul, urging him to come home as quickly as possible. He assured me he'd be there soon. When my mom arrived to check on the situation, we were both deeply unsettled, but I knew we needed to stand our ground against Sarah's outrageous attempt to usurp our home. When Sarah saw my mother, she was visibly flustered. "What the hell, Jamie? Why is your mother here? I told you that you and your family can't be here. I've already sent your stuff to your mother's place." "Then why is she here?" I replied with a smirk. "Well, you said that from now on, only the homeowner and the mother can stay here. So I called my mother and invited her over. This house is owned by my son. You should not be here." Sarah countered sharply. "I demand that you leave immediately." I couldn't help but laugh, finding the irony delicious, and my mother joined in. Though I was angry, the laughter provided a welcome relief, reminding me of what needed to be clarified next. Once we composed ourselves, I turned to Sarah with a calm demeanor. "Just for your information, my dear mother-in-law, this house belongs to me," I began, my tone even but firm. "Yes. This house is in my name. It was part of my inheritance from my grandfather, who passed away recently." "You can't be telling the truth. I don't believe you. This house cannot be yours. I know my son got this house for you." Sarah sputtered, disbelief etched across her face. "Just wait till he comes home and shows you your place. I will not tolerate you keeping me away from the house." Sarah's confusion was met with a blunt correction from my mother. "She's telling the truth, Sarah. You have some messed up logic about preserving your son's things. Even if the house is Jamie's, you shouldn't be so entitled. Jamie is Paul's wife and is equally entitled to his assets. I don't take advice from freeloaders, Sarah snapped at Rebecca. I suggest you keep your mouth shut. As for Paul, I will stay with him and ensure he divorces Jamie soon. Just a few minutes later, Paul walked through the front door, clearly bewildered by the sight of his mother standing in the middle of our living room. He looked even more puzzled to see my mother, whom I hadn't told him I invited over. Hey, guys, what's going on here? He asked as he entered. Jamie, you told me to come home soon. Has something happened? Something has happened, Paul. Your overbearing mother and her mother are trying to take over your house, Sarah declared dramatically. Paul, taken aback, responded firmly, Mom, what the hell is going on? Why would you disrespect my wife and her mother? They're right here. He then turned to me, giving me the floor to explain. Let me tell you what happened, I began, ready to unveil the absurd scenario Sarah had orchestrated. Paul stood in the middle of our living room, utterly stunned as he processed what I had just explained. Oh my God, are you serious? Mom, did you pack up Jamie's belongings and send them to her mom's house? Did you come into our home and move our things? Who gave you the right to do that? I'm just trying to help you, Sarah protested, feigning innocence. You need to reconsider your marriage. I've been telling you not to tolerate her freeloading behavior. Trust me, I can find you a better wife. Mom, I've told you so many times not to interfere in my marriage. Why are you still doing this? Paul's voice was firm, his frustration clear. I'm standing up for you. Your wife will drain your finances if you don't end this. That's why I moved into your house. I'm going to stay with you. You need to stop saying it's his house. I interjected firmly. Sarah, I've already told you this house is mine. If any mother is staying here, it will be mine. Paul looked exasperated as Sarah continued her tirade. Look at what your witch of a wife is saying. I told you she's a gold digger. She's already claiming this house is hers. Mom, stop insulting Jamie. This is ridiculous. Paul snapped, his patience worn thin. She's right, the house belongs to Jamie. It was part of her inheritance after her grandfather passed away. Sarah's face turned to ashen as the truth finally dawned on her. My mother chuckled slightly from the corner, enjoying Sarah's discomfort, while Paul looked like he was on the verge of losing his temper completely. Desperate to regain her composure, Sarah scrambled for another angle. It doesn't matter, since you two are married. This house is yours too, Paul. I have the right to stay here. Why should I live in a rented apartment when you have a house? I won't let Jamie take everything from me. You need to kick her out, Sarah insisted stubbornly. Mom, you need to leave, Paul declared, his voice rising with each word. I've had enough of you meddling in my marriage. No matter how much you dislike Jamie, I am not leaving her. I've made that abundantly clear. You've gone too far with your antics. There's no way you're staying here. Your wife is blackmailing you with the house, Paul. You can't stay with her. Trust me, it'll be so much better if you divorce her. I can find you a new wife. Sarah tried to manipulate the situation further. The tension escalated, and chaos ensued. Paul began shouting at Sarah, his anger boiling over, while I joined in, equally furious at her outrageous behavior. It was clear that this confrontation was reaching a breaking point. Finally, fed up, I took decisive action and kicked Sarah out. She looked desperately at Paul for support, but he couldn't even meet her gaze. I stormed to the guest room, grabbed her suitcases, and threw them out the door alongside her. Sarah spent a solid hour weeping on our doorstep until I warned her I would call the police if she didn't leave. Eventually, she got up and left. Inside, Paul was overwhelmed with guilt and began to apologize profusely. My mother discreetly slipped into the kitchen to give us some privacy. Jamie, I'm so sorry. I should have cut ties with my mom a long time ago. All these years, she kept attacking you, and I still allowed her into our lives. I thought she might change and accept you as my wife. But it's clear now that she never will, he lamented. Paul, I understand she's your mom, and you felt a duty to take care of her. But her behavior has been unbearable. She tried to kick me out of my own home, I replied, my voice firm yet weary. I know, Jamie, and I can't believe she went that far. But don't worry, she won't get away with this. I'm going to stop supporting her financially. She doesn't deserve my kindness after what she's done. You won't have to deal with her again, Paul promised, his tone resolute. We spent a long time discussing our boundaries and expectations moving forward, reaching a solid understanding that brought me considerable relief. To lighten the mood, my mother stayed for lunch, and we ordered some delicious meals through DoorDash. Despite the morning's upheaval, the day turned out fairly well, aside from my belongings being displaced. It was, in a way, satisfying to finally show Sarah that her behavior was unacceptable. My mother had spoken to the moving company, ensuring everything would be taken care of moving forward. When we arrived at her place and explained the situation, they agreed to return my belongings, though it would take some time. In the meantime, Sarah didn't stop her attempts to stir up trouble. She bombarded Paul with calls and sent me a barrage of texts, accusing me of controlling him and forcing him to cut her off. I shared all her messages with Paul, who was livid and found himself in several heated exchanges with his mother over the following days. It felt like we were trapped in an endless cycle of chaos. That cycle finally broke when we decided it was time to take legal action. We reported Sarah to the police, pressing charges for trespassing, theft, and harassment. The police were taken aback by the extent of her actions and took our complaints seriously. While Sarah hadn't been violent, her behavior was anything but rational. After the incident, we informed Sarah about the police report and had our lawyers begin the process of obtaining a restraining order. However, this didn't deter her. She showed up at our house, furious and unapologetic. "How dare you file a police report against me? I'm your mother, and I deserve respect. Paul, you can't do this to me," she screamed. "I'm done being quiet. What you did was a criminal offense. I don't care what the law says. I'm entitled to be in this house. You've even stopped paying me money. I have nowhere to go. You know I did my lease to live here. I demand you let me in and remove the police report." "That will never happen, Mom. Besides, you don't deserve my money after trying to destroy my marriage," Paul replied firmly. "Sarah, you need to stop shouting at our door. We decided that only the homeowner and her mother will stay here from now on. Since you are neither, you need to leave." My words pushed Sarah over the edge, causing her to have a breakdown right on our doorstep. Neighbors began peeking out of their homes, drawn by the commotion. At one point, a neighbor approached our front door to ask if he should call the police, but when Sarah lunged at him and shouted, he didn't hesitate to dial 911, letting them hear her outburst. My mother-in-law continued her tirade until the police arrived and arrested Sarah. This unfortunate spectacle provided us with the necessary evidence to secure a restraining order, especially since Sarah had also been harassing my mother. Then Paul suggested a surprising solution. "Jamie, I think we should let your mom stay with us for a while," he proposed. "Sarah knows her address and won't stop harassing her. She's becoming increasingly unhinged, and I'm worried she might escalate her behavior. It would be safest if Rebecca stayed here." "Are you sure about this, Paul? I don't want you to feel uncomfortable with her living here, and I don't think Mom would want to impose," I responded, concerned about how the dynamics might affect him. Paul assured me, "I feel bad for Rebecca, and it's the right thing to do. I don't mind at all. It's better for everyone's peace of mind if she stays with us for now." "I know Rebecca is a reasonable person, Jamie. I'd have no problem with her staying here. She's very respectful of our boundaries." That joke between us brought out a hearty laugh, lightening the mood despite the circumstances. I could see that Paul was still struggling with the fallout from his mother's actions, but he was earnestly trying to distance himself from her toxic influence. Cutting ties with a narcissistic parent is a complex and painful process, and we've been discussing therapy for Paul to help him navigate these emotional waters. He's open to the idea but needs some time to organize his thoughts. Understanding his mental state, I'm doing my best to support him. Meanwhile, cut off from directly contacting us, Sarah has been trying to appeal to my mom, Rebecca, to garner sympathy. She laments how unfairly she's been treated, claiming she has nowhere to go and is now living in her car. Over the years, Sarah has alienated so many people that no one is willing to take her in. Paul remains firm in his decision not to support her financially anymore, forcing Sarah to confront the reality of finding a job, an idea that terrifies her, especially with several police reports and an arrest on her record. We've reached a point where we are indifferent to her plight. I can candidly say that I am relieved to see Sarah facing the consequences of her actions. This tough love is long overdue, and while it's harsh, it's necessary for our peace and to finally bring some sanity back into our lives.